Welcome everybody to the June edition of the Road to. We have a really interesting panel today, including two candidates who have regularly been our speakers here. And I'm going to start with Phyllis Randall because she has been a regular pundit for many years now and is now running for the chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County. So give us your little intro.
Well, thank you, Patty, and you're right. It's so interesting to be an analyst and now to be a candidate. And by the way, it's for chair. Not chairman, it's for chair.
Chairwoman.
Chairwoman, chairperson, chair for the Board of Supervisors, that's fine. So I have, most importantly, is I have two children and a wonderful husband. I've lived in Loudoun County for 21 years. I'm the immediate past chair of Virginia's Fair Housing Board and the current vice chair of the Virginia Board of Corrections. I have been a community activist in my county for over 20 years, and now I am running for chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. And the funny thing is, I say chair because by state law and statute, it's actually called chairman. So one of the first things we're going to do is ask the state to change that. I think it's time to change that to chair, exactly. Okay. So thank you. Wonderful being here.
Okay, great. We'll talk more about that later. And our other candidate here is Liz Miller, who's running for the House of Delegates. Just barely lost last time. And I'll let you fill in the blanks there.
I'm having a terrific time running for the House of Delegates. I'm running in the 32nd District, which is Ashburn, Broadlands, a bit of Lansdowne, and small parts each of Brambleton and Algonquian.
So all Loudoun, right?
All Loudoun. The entire district's in Loudoun. You can actually walk the entire district, the length and the breadth in one day if you don't stop to talk to anybody, but I never don't stop to talk to anybody. I'm knocking doors and talking to people all the time, and I love that. Okay. And I've just been having such a wonderful time. People are really excited about having somebody who can come in and do something different. They're angry about the Greenway, they're angry about not having full-day kindergarten, and they're ready for change. Okay.
We'll get into more issues later in the show. And of course, our regular Jim Parmalee, who's been here for many years.
Yeah, I'm Jim Parmalee. I run the Northern Virginia Republican PAC and Republicans United for Tax Relief. And I also host some other additional shows on this station.
Okay, cool. I'm sure anyone watching the show has seen you many times. And also Marlene Barney, who is another longtime producer, moderator, pundit of this show. Go ahead, Marlene.
Well, it's great to be here, and like Phyllis, it's a little weird because I'm usually not an analyst. I'm usually co-hosting, taking turns with you, but I think we have some interesting things to talk about. I'm a retired school teacher, and also prior to that had a career in telecommunications. So I know a little bit about both subjects. I am putting together, or sort of running or trying to put together an advocacy group for educators called Educator Power. And I occasionally do a blog, write a blog about buying USA-made products. So as I said, I'm retired, so I have more time to do those things now.
And all issues related to some of the things we're going to talk about today. So we did want to start off, though, with a tribute to Beau Biden, whose untimely death this past week or last weekend took some of us by shock. And I wanted to just maybe go around and just give everyone a chance if they have some comments on it. And if you don't, fine too. But Marlene, why don't we start with you?
Well, I never had the honor of meeting Beau Biden personally. I really like Joe Biden and Joe Biden. And he sounds like he was a wonderful person with a lot of potential, wonderful man, husband, son. He endured a tragic accident early in his life and lost his mother and his little sister. And so it's just, my heart goes out to the Biden family, really. I can't think of any worse kind of loss than a parent losing a child. And so my heart just aches for them, and you know, they're just in my thoughts and prayers.
Okay, Phyllis?
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think of our vice president right now that, you know, he had 3 children, and now he has 1. And that is absolutely heartbreaking. And it makes you remember to hold your family tight and tell the ones that you love them, because he's the vice president, so you know he had access to the best medical care and the best doctors around the world. But sometimes even the best medical care cannot save the ones you love. I will say, though, at this very sad time, it does speak to why it's important to have good medical care and good insurance, even when someone is terminal and not going to make it. And even in that tragic time, you know, you make the person as comfortable as possible and have them surrounded by friends and loved ones. And sometimes if people don't have the means and insurance to do that, then the deaths can be that much more painful and that much more tragic. And so it is a cautionary tale that you know, simply power and money won't always save you, but sometimes it can. The right insurance and the right resources can add comfort in the sometimes the darkest and final days.
Jim, did you want to say anything?
No, heart goes out to the family.
Okay.
For me, we met Joe Biden several years ago when my son was small, and he was just so kind to my son. And it's striking pretty close to my family at the moment, because one of my cousins also has brain cancer, and we only found out about it a couple of months ago when he collapsed. It was utterly undiagnosed, and so sorry, but it's hard to think about.
It is.
It's really hard on
only
family.
46 years old.
Yeah.
He's only 46. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I saw the picture on the front page of the Post yesterday of the Biden family. I don't know if you guys saw that, but that told the whole story.
It did.
And basically, Vice President Biden had his eyes closed and was kind of looking up, and had his head tilted up, praying, and it
was heartbreaking,
tear-jerking just to read it. Anyway, so thanks everyone for that tribute to someone who should have been around for a long time. But let's go to some more just political issues, I guess. We wanted to touch on this debate in the last couple weeks over the reauthorization of the Patriot Act, because it's a federal level thing, but it does permeate down to the whole principle of privacy and what kind of society we want. So I thought the debate was incredibly interesting, with Rand Paul doing his filibuster, and I just wondered if we had comments about sort of the larger set of principles, and then it's difficult to get into some of the technicalities of it, because there's a lot of technicalities that get very confusing. But the issue of privacy, the issue of how far to go to, how far we need to go to protect security versus infringing on civil liberties. And Jim, I'll let you start off on that one.
So I get the easy question. You know, I certainly want the government to have the authority it needs to stop terrorism, and I think we all do. The question is where you draw the line, and I don't have. This is a very complicated act, a lot of moving parts, so I don't know everything about it. But it does seem to me that while they're collecting all of this data, that they should be able to get a warrant that it may slow the process down, and you have to maybe try to figure out ways to expedite a judge reviewing a request for a warrant so that you don't slow it down so that something bad happens. But I think if you can do it quickly, review, is this really a target of an investigation? Do we need to get this information? You want to try to make it as fast as you can do it now. But I think putting a warrant, putting that process in there does add a layer of review, so you don't have people just sifting around looking for things that are not actually part of an investigation.
You have greater control.
Right.
Marlene, what about you?
Well, I have mixed feelings also, and I have to say this is one thing I agree with you on, Jim, is that I do think that the process should be slowed down and it should be reviewed by a judge and have to obtain a warrant. I also have issues with the government and even telephone companies holding large quantities of data, or metadata as they call it, especially with all of the things that are going on in the cyber world now with, like China hacking
OPM.
data and all of that, so it's like, yeah, right, OPM was just hacked. So whether it's an agency or a private corporation, things get hacked and large amounts of data get stolen, and it's on the data is not always directly on suspects, but just people that are sometimes randomly associated or maybe not associated. So that's my issue with the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting when you have Jim Parmalee and Marlene Barney agreeing on an issue, then that issue probably is something that needs to take a hard look at that. I think we should remember that the Patriot Act was signed and put into law shortly after September 11th. Right. And we were all kind of, obviously, and for reasons that we can understand, kind of at a fever pitch. And there was one Congresswoman Barbara Lee from California, who voted against it, saying, we don't know what's in here, and we should stop and take a breath. And at that moment, we were in freedom fries and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All that kind of madness.
Because the French were our biggest problem.
Exactly.
Well, no, but two things.
Let me
Okay.
just finish. And so what I think is, that sometimes when we are in kind of a heightened pitch, it's the exact time to stop and take a breath. I agree with Jim and with Marlene. I think that when there's that much evidence being collected, or rather that much information being collected, even if if there's no evidence that it's being used, the perception makes people uncomfortable. And I don't think there's been enough transparency and clarity about why that information is being collected, or even if it's being collected and by whom, and how many degrees from a person of interest may also have their data collected. So I think there's a lot of things we should stop and take a look at and pause. And so for the most part, I think I'm sitting in agreement with you, Jim.
I'm starting to wonder if I should change my mind.
I actually, one of the things that strikes me not about the Freedom Act and the Patriot Act so much, but our own going through our lives every day. If you take a look at Facebook, for example, how much information is available about you on Facebook? And if you do any of those games where, what's my elf name? And it's your last name or your mom's last name, the first two letters of your middle name and your birth month, and you put it together, and it's
that's your elf name.
And you've got your elf name. This is new.
It's one of those little games. But what it is
a hacker came up with it to figure out your password.
Possibly.
Even better, it's
never
an
done
elf
that.
yourself video, but that's another
But
story.
it's things that actually people are using to get more information about you. What month were you born? Okay, what year were you born? Things like that. And we give that stuff up for free on Facebook. And yes, it's important that the government not be all up in our business all the time, but it's also important to remember who else is up in your business, and you need to be thinking about that when you're online.
That's kind of the issue I always go to, is like, wait, why is it okay for corporations to have so much information about us? I was looking for shoes and the exact pairs of shoes that I was looking for and hadn't decided on, every website I went on after that, the same shoes would pop up, and I was like,
Google
okay.
Ads.
Or if I look online,
that's because
right.
they know what I'm interested
Yeah.
in.
But
I'm
also
looking at
because
a-
you gave it to them. I mean, I think that's the key
No,
thing.
I
is
just
we
went
give
and
it-
looked.
Yeah.
Right.
I just went and looked on
But
one
you need to
site.
disable,
But
you
you-
need to disable the cookies.
If I'm
cookies,
browsing
yeah.
on the internet
So it's
for something in particular, all of a sudden I'm also getting emails about it. Oh, special deals on this or that, and it's
Right,
like, wait.
right.
If you use Gmail, I mean, I love Gmail, but if you use Gmail and you do discussions with Amazon or something, or any customer service, you'll start getting ads for the companies that you are doing business with up in the feeder.
Yeah, Google actually will
Yeah.
search your emails,
Yeah.
and they claim that they're not searching it, that it's automatic, so that it's not somebody just sitting around reading your emails, but they will they will automatically go through your emails to set up
I
ads.
think the answer is if you're worried about your privacy, you stay off the internet and you don't call anyone overseas.
Stay home.
You can also use anonymizers and things like that, or turn off cookies.
Yeah.
There's all sorts
Someone
of things
could
you
make a
can
lot
do.
of money on
but it makes
how to protect
your job.
privacy class.
It makes the things that you're doing online very much harder because they want to get that information, and it's available.
Just to wrap up the.
Oh,
I was just going to wrap up the Freedom Act. What
Oh,
do you
just
have
one
to-
more.
I wanted to
We'll
make
take
one
some-
more little point.
Okay.
And that,
Did you?
and it's not really a little point, but along with the thing about China hacking, it's like, why aren't we taking more direct action when that's done? You know, why is it
Let
that
me just tell
it's
you.
okay?
Let me say this generically. Any action we're taking would be classified.
Okay.
And let me jump in, because I
Hopefully
mean,
we're
Tell you what
taking some
They're doing
action.
sometimes, but not what we're doing.
I mean, there is common ground between the right and the left, and many in the center on privacy issues. I think that's where we find some of the agreement here. But I think it's important to know the government does need a certain amount of authority in order to protect us from a lot of folks
I think
that
we
are
have
out
common
to
ground
get
on that too.
us,
Yeah,
right?
I think there's common
and so it's
ground
where
there
you
also.
draw
That's why
that
I said I
line.
have
Absolutely.
mixed feelings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to be careful, but we do also need to remember that there are threats out
Absolutely,
there.
yeah.
absolutely.
It's just that's why I think warrants are a good idea, but we do need to.
We are in agreement.
It's
Yeah.
one of
There we go.
those. There's a balance.
There's a
and
balance.
I think, well, the president's presentations, how I was going to wrap this issue up, was that the balance was found in his mind. That it's okay. You know, there's an advocate now, a consumer advocate on the FISA court. There are other protections that you mentioned. Having to. The data is available, but you have to make sure that there is a warrant that goes back to that there's a degree of separation between the data and the government access to that data. Anyway, so I think we've covered that pretty sufficiently. We're not going to find an answer today, but so one of the other things we kind of wanted to bring this back to the state races, because we've got Liz running for the House of Delegates at the state level, and we've got Phyllis running for county chair in Loudoun. And so we wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to talk to some of the issues that are front and center in your mind with regard to your races. So why don't we start with Liz, and you guys can chime in, but let's put the focus on the candidates for a little while and what things that you're concerned about and what you would do in Richmond.
The things that are popping up for me at pretty much every door is people want distance pricing on the Greenway. They want universal full-day kindergarten in Loudoun County.
Distance pricing, so like
So if you
more
get on,
incremental.
if you get on at Route 28, I don't know how many of the people who are watching ever take the Greenway. Greenway is the most expensive piece of road in the entire country, mile for mile. If you get on at Route 28, where the main toll booth is, and you get off at 606, which is the first exit, you are paying as though you're going to Leesburg, which is $5.20.
I think so. I don't take the Greenway. Because this is
A lot
the
of
very
people
reason.
don't because it's just too much.
It's too much
How do you
money.
feel about the Beltway
some of them take
hot
it.
lanes and
The
the
hot
ones
lanes,
they're proposing for
I
66?
I haven't actually taken those, but the hot lanes, so far as I've seen from the monitors, is distance pricing. When you get on to
But very expensive.
well, depending on when you're riding. But the point is that if you get on at the Spring Hill Road exit, I guess it is, and you are going just one exit, then you pay less than if you were going all the way to
Like
Silver
the regular
Spring.
toll road.
Like the regular toll road.
Although I pay and get off on Route 7,
But-
which is about
But she's talking
200
about
feet.
the issues
But
with her
but
constituents
but
right
my
now.
constituents aren't very interested in the hot lanes. What they're interested in is distance pricing on the greenway, so that because we're at generally the second and third and fourth exits off the greenway. If you're getting off after just driving basically 2 miles and you're paying as though you're going all the way to Leesburg, people resent that and they don't take it, which means that all of our other roads, our secondary roads, are completely congested. It takes, it literally takes me about 20 minutes to go from my house 3 miles to
28.
well, actually it's not 3 miles, but it's it's not a very big distance to get to 28.
Is
if
that
I
on
go
Waxpool?
on Waxpool.
Yeah, that's
Now,
ridiculous.
It's a nightmare, and it'll take like 4 light cycles to get through most of the lights.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's because people are not taking the greenway, and they're not taking the greenway because it's too expensive, and they resent the prices. If you get on the Leesburg side and you get off at any exit, you pay less. You pay distance pricing from that direction, but you don't pay it.
And I
So
think-
people in the western end of the county would I imagine would want to keep the prices the way they are, is what you're saying?
Well, no.
Because they
No
would
one
be
wants to keep
paying
it.
less overall.
I think
Distance pricing would increase
we
it
should
for
also
them,
remember,
maybe?
though, is that
Maybe.
the greenway is not state-owned.
Right.
It's owned by a
Right.
private
Exactly.
company, then that company's not even in this country.
Yeah, it's an Australian
It's an
company.
Aus- it's an Australian company there.
Trip 2.
Exactly.
That I
And-
But the hot
and-
lanes,
and-
the hot
well,
lanes around the Beltway are owned, I
Right.
But
believe, by.
again, it's not an issue for our county. The hot lanes
Oh,
on the Beltway.
I'm sorry.
nobody,
Okay,
nobody,
we're only talking about one distance. Sorry. Okay. Oh.
But the thing is that the guy I am running against has taken money from Trip 2. They've donated to his campaign. So no matter what he says about how he wants to fix it, he gets money from them. I would never take money from them. They're hated in my county. They're hated in my district.
Let's go to Phyllis for a minute, and then we'll get back. We'll get into maybe some of the social issues that you guys are interested
And we
in.
can
And
also talk about full-day
education.
kindergarten
Yes,
also afterwards, because
absolutely.
it's for both of us. So go on.
Yes.
Well, I'm running for a myriad of reasons. I think my top 3 that I would say are education, jobs in the economy, and transportation. And they really do intertwine. And where the place that they intertwine is a place called development and how we choose to develop Loudoun County. We are actually moving toward our final build out of Loudoun County, the final phase, which estimates to be built out somewhere between 2030 and 2040. And what is very important is that we get this build out right, that we get the development along the Metro Corridor correct. We all know that at the Station 606 on the Metro Corridor, they will not allow residential housing because of the airport proximity, but they will allow it at 772. And so I very much support mixed-use communities where people can live and work and play all at the same time. I
Smart
support
growth,
smart
essential.
growth, absolutely. I absolutely support the Metro Silver Line.
What's the schedule for that?
Well, it's been pushed back another year, and another $270 million, unfortunately. So we're not quite sure when the schedule is going to happen yet. But I will tell you that I do support mass transit, not only Metro, but I also support in Loudoun an increase in commuter buses and a graduated commuter bus price. But the one way to get cars off the road in Loudoun County is to have jobs in Loudoun County.
Yes.
So jobs in the economy are my #1 focus, and bringing key businesses to Loudoun County, especially along that Metro Corridor, will be my #1 focus. Obviously, I've been an advocate for education for years, and obviously full-day kindergarten, it is kind of Loudoun's shame that we are one of 3 counties in the state of Virginia, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that does not have full-day kindergarten.
And
I
the only
find that-
one
hold
of
me
those
second.
3 that doesn't have a plan to have it.
Well, I find it appalling that some of our legislators have said that kindergarten is daycare. Kindergarten is not daycare. It is learning, and our teachers are not babysitters. Our teachers are highly educated professionals who choose to do this job.
Thank you.
And we should treat them with respect and dignity. And there has not been one study that does not show the importance of having more curriculum in full-day kindergarten, and how you see the advance as children go on. So that is an issue that I very much support.
And Senator Tim Kaine is a big advocate of that
Big
pre-K.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Liz?
One of the things that really frosts my cookies is that not only are we one of the only districts that doesn't have universal full-day kindergarten, but because of that, our kids are taking SOLs in the later grades, along with kids who have full-day kindergarten. And so those, as more and more of the communities around the state have implemented full-day kindergarten, our kids are competing with those kids in terms of the SOLs.
We don't want to have SOLs anymore anyway. We want to change the Common Core. SOLs are illogical.
Well, we're going to get to that issue.
You guys got to get on the same page on this one.
Well,
because
no,
we're going to get to that issue in our second half in more depth.
Do you need one for the other or not?
But,
Yeah, we'll talk
the other
about
thing
that.
is that there are jurisdictions around the state that are now pushing for full-day universal pre-K, and which I think is wonderful, but we need full-day kindergarten first.
Right.
If we're paying for
Yeah.
other people's full-day kindergarten, other people's full-day pre-K, it needs to be paid for us too.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
that's
we're
an issue
gonna
that's
we're
revised
gonna
to
wrap
Howard.
Both,
We're
really.
gonna wrap up for this half, and we'll be right back after the break. But we'll get back to this issue in more depth of education in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We'll be right back.
There have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember,
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. One nation,
Under God.
Indivisible.
with liberty.
And justice.
For all.
in America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
You'd never know it on the battlefield, but nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
I'm sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of
I work 6 days a week.
Who
do you think you
Stand
are?
up straight. Don't you ever talk back to me again! You just shut up!
What are you crying about?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act Against Violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promise.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promise.
What kind of man are you?
I'm a father.
Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schmasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.
As time flows on, there are places we return to again and again. precious places. Timeless places. Places that with your help can endure forever. I'm Paul Newman. Help the Nature Conservancy save the last great places around the world.
Okay, welcome back. All right, guys. We're chit-chatting over the break. We wanted to pick it up for this half with the education debate, which we were just having pretty vigorously, and discussing Common Core, which is a national set of standards, versus SOL in Virginia versus what was No Child Left Behind. So I'm going to start with a teacher here, and if you guys can hold your fire just for a minute, let's hear it from Marlene's perspective.
Well, first of all, there's only a few states that have not adopted Common Core, and Virginia is one of them. And being a former Virginia teacher, I don't know a whole lot about Common Core because we didn't adopt it, so I didn't teach under that. Mm-hmm. I taught under the SOL/No Child Left Behind model, which is state-based, first of all, instead of a nationally normed standards. I like the concept of nationally normed. Instead of this state does this and this state does that, it does give it more, consistency and compares everybody at the same kind of standard. The only issue I have is with the standards themselves, because at least in Virginia, the SOL standards, I have an issue with SOL standards actually too. SOL standards seem to focus more on memorization than critical thinking skills. Mm-hmm. So that's my issue with that. We definitely need to teach more critical thinking skills.
How do they do that?
Well,
what's the flaw? What do you perceive as the flaw in the SOL?
Well, it's like
can I take this? Students, please. Can I just please have him?
Students should know all the literary terms or all the character types. That's really memorization.
But
now, when you get into actually analyzing something for what the writer's style is or the literary terms, that's more critical thinking.
Can you analyze those things without understanding the terms that you're using?
No, you can't.
So you need both.
Common Core takes it a step further in that the standards with Common Core do have a lot of analysis, the ones that I've looked at. And as I said, we didn't teach under that, but I have looked at a lot of the Common Core standards, especially for English and writing, which was my area. Math, I don't.
Let's let Phyllis address
She's
she's grinding her teeth over here.
I know
she's
she
going to
has
impose
it
Common Core right now.
She's going to get into it with Jim.
It's on this show.
But I just want to say that the ones that I have looked at, on the other hand, they need to have more teacher input, I think. Common Core advertises that they had teacher input. I don't know what teacher input they had, but they're very sosophisticated standards, so that they would play well to someone who went to a top-notch school, but not necessarily say. I mean, there's a discrepancy between schools right now. So with that, I'll hand it over to you.
So our children are not just competing with children in Ohio or Pennsylvania. Our children are competing with kids in India and China and all over the world. That's what the world is now. We are a global society, and so we have to actually prepare our children to think critically. So what does that mean? Well, I had children who took the SOL test, and I can tell you that the SOL is flat rope memory. For instance, and I'll just give you an example. If you are taught to say a phrase or a paragraph or two in another language, and you can memorize those phrases and you can kick them back out, but you have no idea what language you're speaking or what you're saying, what is the point? That is very much what the SOLs do. They teach you to memorize. There was a question on the SOL that my son had, and one of the questions was, what did Greece give the world? And the answer was sports. Well, what does that even mean, sports? Does that mean hacky sack?
Or that was it choose one of four?
No. It was 3 things, and one of the 3 things was sports. But the Greece didn't give the world sports; it gave the world the Olympics, and why and how that began.
It also gave the world the ability to think.
So
anyway.
a deeper level of thinking.
Art.
The other thing, and I think you asked about the question, and the question of how do you get to that deeper level. What we know is children learn 9 different ways, and unfortunately, right now we teach one way, and that one way is children sit and learn, and if you can't get that, then you must have ADD. So now let's give you some Ritalin because you can't learn this way that we teach. Children learn all different ways, and so Common Core actually gives teachers the opportunity to teach the child in a way that child may learn. That actually makes an enormous difference. Whether they're tactile learners, whether they're auditory learners, whether they're experiential learners, that's a difference. I also will say, and Marlene's completely right, SOLs are a state norm standard that came from an unfunded mandate through President Bush under the No Child Left Behind mantra. It's illogical to have just a state one standard. To have our children's test in Loudoun compared to the children in Petersburg or Norfolk, and now we say, oh my gosh, we're doing wonderful because we're testing better than the kids in Petersburg or Norfolk. That is great. How are we doing against the kids in Connecticut? How are we doing against the kids in Rhode Island? So we do need to have national standards, and even then move to another level and find out how we get doing against the kids in Dubai, how we get doing against the kids in Beijing. So the SOLs were a microcosm of actually what needs to happen in education. The world has changed. SOLs would have been great for us and for our generation. These kids, these kids talk to kids in different countries on a regular basis. It is time for the education system to catch up with technology, to catch up with the world. It's time for critical thinking. It's time for more ways of learning, and it's time for different ways of teaching. I'm not saying you don't do tests. You do tests.
But one of the things that I'm worried about is, like, there has been a huge brouhaha up in New York over the tests because Pearson has been doing high stakes testing up there. The state has hired Pearson to do their testing.
Who's Pearson?
They're a company that does the tests.
Okay.
They also print the textbooks that teach to the test. And the problem is that New York State has geared teacher pay and also school funding on the outcomes of these tests. And the tests have not been great. A lot of them they actually threw out the test scores because the grading on them was totally fouled up. And so my feeling is that yes, we need to have the standards, and we need to make sure that everybody in the country is teaching to the same standards. But we need to then look at how do we grade those standards? How do we make sure that people are meeting those standards? Because the current systems of testing are too easily played. And we need to figure out how do we make sure that no one company has too much power over it? How do we make sure that that teachers get to have a little bit more creativity in the room? How do we make sure that it's not all, that everybody's jobs are on the line over one test?
So you want standards but no accountability?
No, I want accountability, but I want us to talk about how is that accountability done, and can we have a multimodal way of doing that accountability?
Right.
Well, it's really interesting.
Kids can be evaluated on other things besides just paper and pencil tests. I mean, you can have hands-on projects that you're looking like you who went to school without walls.
I'm having a flashback to try. It's like you're trying to talk a teacher out of a bad grade by trying. I mean,
you get graded still. If that makes you feel more comfortable.
Let's let Jim chime in here. He's been listening.
Well, I'm confused because I'm not sure what it is exactly that you're looking for. I mean, I keep hearing we don't want high stakes testing, evidently, but I'm not sure what low stakes testing
Well,
is
I'm not
because
just
they all
saying-
seem pretty high stakes when I was taking them.
Think about your kid in a school. Your kid has to write essays, they have to do homework, they have to have class participation, and they have to do well on the tests, right? That's at least 4 different ways of being graded in a class, and their grade is completely composed of those 4 things. Well, but then you take a look at a school, and the school is entirely graded on just this end of the year test. That doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to have people coming into the school, seeing how kids are doing in the classes.
Multiple milestones.
What kind of essays are they getting? Can we get a random sampling of the essays and take a look and make sure that that the kids are writing on a certain level? How much homework is getting completed, and can we take a look at what the homework assignments were and what the answers were? You know, just an assortment for every school.
And actually, what you're talking about is you're talking about encouraging children to think. That's what it comes down to.
Well, but I don't think anybody wants children not to think. But what you're saying, I mean, you're talking. I mean, if the kids are not passing the test, then we need to determine why they don't know the things that are on the test and try to teach them those things. Not try to say we shouldn't be focusing on things the kids aren't learning, because eventually down the line, those kids might need to know some of the things that we don't want to test them on because they're not learning.
No,
and
there is
that
a way.
seems to be
There is
unfair
a
to
balance.
the children.
Right.
There is a balance. I mean, I grew up in New York State where we did Regents tests for
Right.
all of our most important college preparatory classes, and they all had a combination of facts and problem solving, and for the English and social studies, writing.
Yeah.
And so they had to grade. You had to write a good, one pager right there on the spot.
New York High School high five.
All right.
I mean, I'm not opposed to those are in the SL. The SLs are. I mean, the standards of learning. You can adjust those tests. It sounds like you're throwing out. You want to throw out the whole thing.
Well, it's just the national versus the comparing.
What do you mean you can adjust those tests? What does that mean you can adjust those tests?
If you're concerned, no. What I mean is, if you don't like the question about Greece, if you don't like the question about Greece, whatever panel is putting those together can work on those questions.
43 states have adopted Common Core. The most recent one being the state of Ohio, with the very liberal Republican governor John Kasich, right? Who's looking to run for president very soon. So Virginia is actually on the back end of this issue. So we're not talking about just those crazy liberal states of California and Massachusetts who've adopted these standards. Around the country, they're looking at evidence-based, critical thinking skills, experiential learning, and how a student thinks. And when they look at those,
test that?
Well,
without testing. I mean, you test.
That's a great question.
You ask
like
them,
the analytic part of the SAT. That's what it's like.
I mean, but those are still questions that they have to answer. And when you start talking about,
you have children who go into a class and they are set down with a test on a number 2 pencil and told you have 45 minutes to answer this, and they may or may not be able to do that. You take that same child and say, tell me about the Civil War. Tell me about who, and that child can do that verbally, which means they know it.
Can't tell you any of the facts that are on the test?
Not always. It depends on the child. Children learn differently.
I understand
they
that, but
answer
they
questions
have
differently.
to all live
They
in the
process
same world.
Let someone else get
if they
word in
know the
edgewise.
answer to the if they know the answer to the question.
I'm doing critical thinking.
If you are, and good job for you. So you should actually be under Common Core. If they know the answer to the questions, if they've learned the material, why is it only important that they spit that material back on paper versus giving it to you verbally or some other way? Maybe we're not that disagreement, Jim.
I've been trying really hard to say something.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
I'm so sorry. Go ahead,
Marlene, and then we'll go back to you.
Is that what I was actually picking up on your point of multimodal? Because Jim, when I said projects, I didn't mean just projects. You can have a project that incorporates an essay and other things that show creativity and innovation. And by the way, teachers that now are not just teaching by lecturing. Differentiated instruction is hammered at us so that we are teaching to some of the other ways like tactile, visual, and those ways. And a project can incorporate all of those things for all of those different learning styles, you know? And so that's all I was trying to say, is there are other ways of evaluating kids besides taking a paper and pencil test. There's also good tests and bad tests. And the SOLs are like the very bare minimum of what
a child can memorize.
Someone can memorize, basically.
Let's think about this. Just you wouldn't evaluate a business just purely based on what their gross is. You wouldn't evaluate a business based on one single score, like what they were selling for on Wall Street.
Do they make money? Do they not make money?
But how is their customer satisfaction? What is their repeat customer base? Do they have employee turnover? You know, all of these things are the ways that you would evaluate whether or not you're going to invest in a company.
But if they're losing money consistently, the others probably wouldn't matter.
Yes,
if they were making money, you could try to figure out their long-term prospects.
But it's not the one score that you're going to give them. That's not how.
And this is a great analogy, because if they're making money compared to all other businesses in their field,
then
are they making money compared to
just
the guy next door? SOLs compares Virginia to Virginia. Common Core compares Virginia to the country, and hopefully one day we'll get some place we compare to the world. So that's a great analogy, because if you're only talking about Walmart and Target, okay, but once you throw in there Sam's Club, you have a little bit of a different thing going on there.
But other than this, I'm just curious. Other than the national standards that you're looking for, are the SOLs? If you were to take the SOLs, you were to take a Common Core test side by side. Forget about what you're comparing them to. What's the difference that you're most concerned about?
I think that the statement you just said is correct. I think that the SOLs actually, first of all, I want to get it right with, but one thing is they would need to be what you just called adjusted. So in other words, there's not a educator in the world that does not say that the SOLs teaches you how to memorize. I have kids in the school system. Toward the end of the school year, all they do is SOLs. They do nothing else. And what the teachers are doing is teaching is cramming this stuff into the kids' brain so they can spit it back out in the test. But it's not in context. They're not
Why
teaching
weren't they
them.
learning it throughout the year?
They're not teaching
because that's not what they're.
They're not teaching them.
Grades are based
they're
on
not
SOLs.
teaching them in context.
Why? But they should, shouldn't they?
I'm not saying they didn't learn
Over
throughout
the course
the year.
of the
I'm
year.
saying at the end of the year, all the teacher cares about is that they can spit that back out. So if little Johnny still does not quite understand why Greece gave us sports, because little Johnny was there, but he didn't get his help, and he just doesn't quite understand that. By the end of the year, the teacher's not saying, little Johnny, let me help you understand this concept. The teacher's saying, hey, buddy, I'm sorry you didn't get it when I taught it. Maybe you were absent that day, but answer it right on the test so we can move on. That's what's happening,
So
and that's the
answer
problem.
is to get rid of the test because little Johnny's not learning?
Well, no.
No, the answer is to help little Johnny think critically and figure out why little Johnny
But
didn't
little Johnny's
get that
not learning
section.
this stuff. Evidently, little Johnny doesn't know the information. So he can be as critical. He can be the greatest critical thinker in the world.
Or maybe
but if little Johnny doesn't know the information, it's not going to do any
maybe
good.
little Johnny's question is.
We've got 10 minutes left, and I just want
Poor
to
little
say this, as we all know, this often boils down to the quality of the teacher. So. Phyllis's point that the tests become a serious pressure point is one thing, but the teachers having the resources throughout the year to be able to teach, and have a little more individual attention. But I think we should move on so we can get to your more specific campaign issues, right? We have 10 minutes left.
Okay.
I'm going to give you about three to four right now to tell us about your most critical issues that you're working on, and then we'll go to Phyllis.
All right, we've talked about full-day kindergarten, we've talked about the Greenway, and in general, transportation and the traffic situation for my constituents is huge.
About some of the social issues that have been, front and center for the...
My constituents are concerned about the fact that we did not get Medicaid expansion. The largest employer in my district is Inova Hospital, and they truly wanted it because there are, although in my district there are not a whole lot of people who fall into the gap, the hospital serves a lot of people who fall into the gap. And
can you explain that a little bit more?
There are working people in Sterling and Leesburg who don't earn enough to hit the minimum for
Qualifying for Medicaid?
qualifying for I'm so sorry.
Affordable health care?
Affordable health care, yes. But they are earning too much to qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid only covers 80% of the poverty line and below, which is not a whole lot. If you're actually earning minimum wage in Virginia, you're not making enough. You're making too much to get Medicaid.
You're not making enough to really pay the premiums.
You're not making enough to hit the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act.
Oh wow! So there's a big gap there.
Big gap. 400,000 people in Virginia. So it actually translates to about $5 million a day, which we are just leaving on the table, which is not fiscally conservative. It's not responsible. And hospitals, doctors, all sorts of folks really wanted that Medicaid expansion. All of the chambers of commerce really wanted Medicaid expansion. It makes business sense. And my opponent just said no, and we don't have it. And I think that's irresponsible.
One of your big issues. Okay. And Governor McAuliffe supports that?
Oh, yes. Completely.
But he can't get the legislature to support.
And
the legislature has concerns over the cost of the program because you're saying it's $5 million a day, but the federal government is not going to be covering that forever, and so eventually the state will have to cover it. So you have to try to figure out how to pay.
They have guaranteed 100% for the first 2 years, 90% thereafter.
Well, they make a lot of guarantees. In fact, a lot of these programs that we're paying for now.
You're not trusting the government that you have.
Surprisingly, I do not have 100% faith in everything a politician tells me.
So you're not trusting the folks who are in Congress and the folks who are in the Senate and on the national level. The folks
Sadly,
that are
sometimes my elected officials, Republicans and Democrats, have not been entirely forthcoming.
Well, you know, I do trust my elected officials.
I trust them on many times.
I trust my elected officials to maintain their promises. I don't trust.
That's lovely.
That is a beautiful thought.
That's a lovely thought.
What are the 400,000 people doing that
are we talking about critical thinking?
Caught in this, critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
I'm asking a question.
Okay, go on.
What are the 400,000 people doing that are caught in this gap?
Well, if they have to go to the hospital, they face bankruptcy, or just avoiding paying the bill.
But say you have an emergency. Say your child falls down and cracks the skull.
You go to the ER.
Do they go to the?
You go to the ER,
so isn't that more expensive?
And it is way more expensive. But you go to the ER and you are faced with a huge bill, which could bankrupt your family.
And if you don't pay the bill,
if you don't pay the bill, then the hospital is stuck with it. And if you take a look at what happened down in Southwest Virginia, we entirely lost a hospital. It's gone. Boop, gone. Other hospitals are.
That's not because of.
Okay,
that's
guys,
not because of that.
We've got 5 more minutes, so I need to let the future chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, talk to her issues.
You want to? Well, I have an interesting race right now.
Yeah. Let me. Okay. Sorry, I forgot about this part.
Oh yeah, right.
So Scott York, who's been chair for 12 years?
16. No, 16.
16. Said he wasn't going to run again. So there are 3 Republicans, 2 or 3 that are in the race right now. And then Scott just last week
independents. They're independents. Scott York has been a Republican. He's an independent now.
And an independent, and a Republican, and an independent.
It's hard to follow.
So anyway, Scott's apparently he's going to run again.
Apparently he is.
So he jumped back in with this quote. The field of candidates is simply not qualified to lead the county in the capacity of chair. I have taken a great deal of time to look at them. Allowing any of the current candidates to act in the capacity of chair would be irresponsible to the citizens of Loudoun. Not one of them has even been or sought to be a district supervisor for their community, and the chairmanship is simply not one which should be a training position. So we just wanted to give Phyllis a chance to respond to that.
You know, Chairman York is interesting. Let's go with that right there. First of all, 2 people who are in the race actually sought to be supervisors, so that right there is flat in his face. I'd be one of them. Incorrect. When I decided to run, one thing I did was call Chairman York, because when he at first said he was not going to run, to go sit down with him and talk to him just about some of the issues. He has made, we have made, and he has canceled 3 appointments on me. So the idea that he has taken a look at us, he won't even meet with me, let alone take a look at us. And I believe that's because he knew all along he was going to get back in. He was just waiting until the Loudoun Times-Mirror and the Loudoun Chamber of Commerce bestowed him with the Citizen of the Year award, which they told him they would not do if he was going to run again. The Citizen of the Year award was bestowed on him on Thursday. On Tuesday, he decided that he was going to run again. Does anyone actually think that's true? So the ideal of trust in Scott York is out the door. Let me also say that I have chaired the Virginia Fair Housing Board. I was appointed by Governor McCain and retained by Governor McDonnell. So I was appointed to a state board by a Democrat, and seeing the work that I did on that board, the governor of the state board retained me, the Republican governor. Since Governor McCullough has been here, he appointed me to the Board of Corrections, where I am now the vice chair. So having chaired a state board and being the vice chair of another state board, I'm pretty sure I can handle being the chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. And Scott York's statement and arrogance, and the idea that only one person in Loudoun County that has 350 residents, of all those people, only Scott York can chair our board, is absolutely laughable. It really is absolutely laughable. We are running a fantastic campaign. I had a huge kickoff with over 200 people. I outraised my Republican opponent by $10,000 the first cycle. I am going to events, I am knocking on doors, I am talking to people, and I am getting crossover support from all sections, especially women. The amazing thing is, after that statement from Scott York came out, the number of people that called me and the number of campaign donations I received from women who do not normally, I would say, vote as a Democrat. No, vote as a Democrat. Called me appalled by that narcissistic statement from Chairman York. And so I am, thrilled to be running against Chairman York, and I'm thrilled to hold his record in office up against him. I'm thrilled to be running against somebody who said to the citizens of Loudoun County, your voice only matters on election day. Do you think I'm sad about Scott York being in this race? No. I want Scott York into this race to the very end. Welcome Chairman York to the race. Let's have fun.
You can tell she was a college track athlete. She's kind of competitive. Anyway, sorry we don't have time to kind of respond to that, but we did kind of feel like Phyllis needed a chance to put that out there.
This is going to be fun.
This is going to be, it's already fun. I'm already having fun.
We're going to wrap up for today. We'll be back next month with the Road 2, and we'll be talking more about state and local races, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.